Okay. So I have to admit, I began watching this film for a very specific reason. But let me back up to kind of give you a little context. So I came across this film on YouTube, and I found the trailer because I'm always on the lookout for these films that you've never heard of, and especially since I think this one was actually supposed to be released in 2020, and of course we know how that worked out. So, kind of these lost films from that year that, they have decided not to hold off like they did for things like Black Widow or, No Time to Die or anything like that. So these films that they had made but aren't going to get a theatrical release, and they're trying to make some money back off of them. Because you can never tell where you're going to find the next Their Finest, So I found this one, and I watched the trailer, and I remember just watching it, and my eyes were bugging out, and my jaw was just kind of hanging open because I felt it was the most insensitive setup for a film I had ever come across. It hit me in a very personal spot. Notice I'm not saying offensive, I'm saying insensitive. Very different. And it was one of those things where it's like, I had to see this shit. I had to see what they did with this, because just the setup of it, I swear to God, it felt like someone kicking me in the balls. So let's talk about the setup for this film. So the setup for this movie is that, be ready for this, when you die, by some arbitrary rule of the universe, when you die, souls have to cross over to the next plane of existence in pairs. This is where the whole thing of soulmates comes from. If you don't have a soulmate, you don't get to cross over into, I guess, the next life. They never really say where you're going, but, whatever. So if you die single, then that means you have to basically wait in kind of this purgatory. You're still on Earth, but you're basically a ghost. No one can see or hear you. And you have to try to find your soulmate, I guess, amongst all of the other dead people who, died single. This is a film that is very aware of the holes in its logic, but never makes attempts to answer them. So, for instance, they even raise a question, what about little kids who die? What about people who've been married 4 times? What about people who your loved one or your spouse dies first? I mean, because technically, are you dying single if you've been widowed or widowered? It knows all of these holes, but chooses not to answer them. It's the Klingon forehead bump answer of, it's a long story and we don't discuss it with outsiders. But get ready, because this gets even better. Apparently you have an arbitrary amount of time, apparently it's different for each person, to find your soulmate amongst the other dead losers. And if you don't find your soulmate by that time, you basically fade away, and as if you never existed. So this is not a terrible setup for a, I guess, romantic comedy type film. But I have to say that this is one of the most insensitive things. Look, as you know, because she's been on the show multiple times and will be again very often, I have a person now. I have the person I would consider my soulmate. I am in love, very deeply in love, which is, which is wonderful, and I'm so happy for that. And I thank whatever it is, fate, heaven, God, whoever, whatever, that brought this person into my life and has made my life better. I am truly, truly happy. But here's the thing. This is a fairly recent development. I have been single in my life much longer than I've been in a relationship. The last time, it was, I believe, 10 years in between relationships, you know? So I know what it feels like. Those memories, while growing distant, are still very much there and still very much raw. I know what it means to be lonely. All right? And I all I can say is that, you know, if this film had come out, if I'd seen the trailer for this back when I was single, oh boy. Oh boy. Oh my God, the depression I would have suffered because of just the trailer for this fucking movie is just like, it's just too much. Single people, especially those who have been single for a very long period of time, already feel like they're invisible and like heaven or the universe is mocking them. Like the whole thing about this afterlife that in this movie kind of inhabits, is that it constantly feels like a game that's rigged against the single people. Like all the rules are stacked against them. And when you're single for a very long time, that's exactly how you feel. Like all the chips are stacked against you. Somehow everybody else got the winning hand and you didn't. You know, and there's nothing you can do to change that. And single people already feel like if they die or something happens, they'll just fade away and no one's there to care. You know, the premise for this movie truly reminds me of that line from A Charlie Brown Christmas when he doesn't get any Christmas cards and he says, "I know nobody likes me. Why do we have to have a holiday to emphasize it?" That is what this movie kind of made me feel. And I was like, I have to see this shit. Because I need to see how this works, because this is, do they explain this? You know, is there more to it? And so I was not going into this film with the most open of minds. I was already kind of geared up to just be like, you fucking film, you fucking movie, you bastard movie. But then something happened as I was watching this. I was still very, very on the fence about it, and there was something about this movie that was still holding me back. And at the same time, I found myself really getting engaged with it. Where it won me over was in the dialogue and in the performances. The premise itself is an interesting premise, because the premise, of course, being is that for a person like our main character, Michael, who's played by Andy Karl, an actor who I literally believe is a man of 1,000 faces, because depending on where the camera is shooting him, he looks like either, you know, Nathan Fillion, Ewan McGregor, J. Michael Krasinski. Like, he looks like all these different actors depending on where they shoot him. But anyway, I totally lost my train of thought. The first chunk of this film was really just grinding on me, because again, it was just this world set up to be, you know, to make our main character, you know, feel like, you know, he's a loser, and the idea being that you have to try to find a soulmate and not rely on any of the cheap shit that might have worked in getting laid in the real world. They make it a point of saying, you know, ghosts don't get to have sex. That's out. You know, what do you talk about trying to meet someone? Because politics, you know, what you do for a living, you know, all that is, you know, it no longer matters, right? So you have to make a connection with somebody in the ways that matter. So that's an interesting premise. But again, it's the first chunk of this movie is just irritating as hell to me, because it really does feel like my personal hell. Being alone, you can't watch TV or anything. The only thing you can touch or interact with are books and alcohol. Now, I don't mind the books necessarily. I'm not an avid reader, but, you know, yeah, that's my personal hell. Being trapped being single and all you can drink is booze, because I don't drink. So yes, it literally felt like my personal hell. So I was having a very hard time connecting with this film. But then a great thing happens. Our main character goes and sees his best friend, or a friend of his who died before him, named Angelo, played by an actor who played Joe Jr. in While You Were Sleeping. Hey, I like your sweater. And then suddenly the film becomes just about dialogue and about characters talking and interacting and sharing deeper thoughts in a, down-to-earth kind of setting. And then our main character meets the inevitable love interest through means that will become apparent the more you watch the film. I'm not going to spoil it. He finds that there's one living person who can see and hear him. This young lady, the character's name is Honeybee, yes, for real, played by Nora. I can't even begin to pronounce her last name because I believe it's Russian. So I'm not even going to try to butcher this poor girl's name. I'm just going to refer to her by Honeybee. He meets this girl who for some reason can see and hear him, and they begin to strike up a relationship. And they do this through some truly engaging, wonderful writing and acting. It's just dialogue. There's not a... we, the audience, know that there's a ticking clock. We, the audience, know what's at stake. But for these two characters, it's just two characters interacting. And that is my bread and butter. I love that. And the writing is really good. All the actors have really great chemistry together. And suddenly the film becomes incredibly engaging and incredibly interesting, and the characters' relationship. You totally actually forget about the whole, the whole setup of the world, and just go, it's an alive girl and a dead guy having a conversation, striking up a relationship, and they're just talking. And it's really fucking cool. And it's at this point, through this extended scene, that I realized why, A, I was having such a hard time with this movie, and B, why I also loved it at the same time. This is something I wrote. Now, don't misunderstand me. I am not making the claim I wrote this movie. But this feels like something I would have written back in college. The very first play I wrote, the first play that I wrote that became any kind of success, that allows me to use the title award-winning playwright because it won an award, is a play called My Eyes Adored You. And I have a love-hate relationship with that play. There are certain things about it I'm proud of, and there are certain things about it that I absolutely despise. As I'm watching this film, I am literally seeing my own work for both the positives and the negatives reflected back. If this screenwriter and director, because it's the same person, I'm sorry I forget his name, I'm not saying I wrote his play, but I swear to God, he's me from another timeline. We got all this multiverse stuff going on now in the Marvel movies. He's fucking me from another timeline. Because I swear, this is exactly like something I wrote for both the good and the ill. So the good is that the characters are really well done, and the dialogue is fantastic. It also makes bizarre pop culture references and comparisons that I just eat up. There's a great bit of dialogue in this scene where Angelo compares dating and going out on all these dates like the Kobayashi Maru test from Star Trek 2. That it's not a game you can ever win, but it's a test of character. And I swear to God, that sounds exactly like something I would have written. Maybe not that good, but it sounds like my plays back in college were littered with this pop culture shit for a number of reasons. Does it have a bizarre setup that poses more questions than it does answers, but you just liked the setup? Yep, check. Are the characters endearing even for their flaws? Check. Is the main character a somewhat self-hating, sarcastic, and yet deep down just a really nice guy who will always, when the time comes, sacrifice his own happiness for the one true love of his life? Check. I watched Casablanca a lot. I swear to God, it's like something I fucking wrote. But the problem is, and why I kind of have this love-hate relationship is, like I said, I hate certain aspects of that play, and as such, I kind of hate certain aspects of this movie. For one thing, it is, both the play and the movie are incredibly pessimistic and juvenile. It's this juvenile look at being single, and it is the cry for help of every long-term single person who has always believed, I'm really great, it's everyone else who's the problem, you know, or let me throw myself a pity party and hope that everybody, you know, kind of comes and comforts me, kind of thing. It's that mentality, which when you're in that mindset, you don't realize that's the mindset you're in, but once you grow out of it, you do kind of look and go, oh, fuck. Does this movie also have a lot of, I'm going to say sophomoric humor that it tries to pass off as, you know, cutting edge comedy? Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, sex jokes and a lot, you know, Angelo there, you know, when I come back, I want to come back with a big smiley dildo, you know. That's exactly the type of shit I would have put in one of my plays, because I thought I was Kevin Smith back in the day, you know. So it was a very bizarre feeling to be watching this movie. And I remember one of the first things I thought when I was watching it, man, this would be an interesting setup for a play. And the dialogue was like, oh, it's very play-like. Oh, this would be great. And then it's like, hey, this is one of my fucking plays, or at least one of my plays from back then. I know this review has become more of a compare and contrast my work, which none of you have read, except maybe one or two of my hardcore fandoms. I see a baby. But, you know, I know that that's not really a good review. So let me try to get back to the main point. I watched this movie because I was ready to hate it. But to my surprise, and maybe it's just because it's speaking to me, it's speaking my language, I found that I really enjoyed it. I found that that the premise, while a bit insensitive and having more holes in it than a you know, a Swiss cheese, is still a good setup for a romantic film or a romantic comedy. Again, with the concept of wanting to strip away all the shit we tend to put value on when we're trying to date. And that concept of just be who you are, and the right person will love you despite your faults, or maybe because of your faults. Which, you know, is what happened. You know, hey. And again, I really love the characters and the dialogue. Oh, again, I wish the whole movie was more of just characters talking. You know, when you look at, you know, Aristotle's 6 elements of theater and how he puts plot first, I have always said, as an actor, a playwright, and a director, that I think character is the most important thing. If I have characters, that I think character and dialogue are two of the most important things, because you know, I could listen to good characters with great dialogue played by good actors. I could just listen to them talk. I mean, again, I'm a Kevin Smith fan, you know, and his best work is just characters talking in entertaining ways. I will say that I feel like the film, I almost called it the play, has some structural problems and some vast tonal shifts that just, you know, suddenly it just goes off the fucking rails. Spoiler warning. I have to discuss this in order to give you an example. So this is a spoiler. If you don't want to know about what happens in this movie, skip ahead a little bit to the final grade. So the reason it turns out that Honeybee can see him is because she is about to die. And because she's so close to the line, it becomes blurred and she can. Now, this isn't a thing where, she's going to die of a natural cause or an accident or something like that. No, some stalker is going to shoot and murder her. And it's just, tonally, it just does not match the rest of the film at all. It would have been better, like I say, if it was an accident that that our main character is trying to prevent, or something like that. But this psycho murderer who's like Nicolas Cage light, his performance goes from just pathetic to very, again, very Nicolas Cage kind of thing, on a dime. And it's very disconcerting. It doesn't work. So yeah, there's some structural problems and some tonal issues going on in this picture. I also have to say I kind of breezed over them, but I want to say all the actors do a really good job. It's a film. I'm seeing a lot of these lately, but it's a film of unknowns. It's a film of journeymen and character actors. The only named character in the film is Christina Ricci, and she is not anywhere near the box office draw she was. She's there to kind of be our guardian angel or our exposition dump person, and basically so they can say there's a well-known actor in the film. She does a good job. Christina Ricci has always been a solid actor, though I will say she looks creepier here in this, I can't tell if it's so blonde it's white or actually white hair, than she ever did when she was in her goth Wednesday Addams phase, because it's like the hair is so white, she is so white, it's so pale. I kind of feel like that's what they were going for. I also have to say that this is another thing that made me think of me as a writer, because it has one of those jokes in it that you think is so clever, but everybody else is going to groan at it, that her name, Christina Ricci's character's name, is Scarlet, solely so our main character can at one point say, frankly, Scarlet, I don't give a fuck. I mean, that's the only reason they named her that. And I just like I'll groan at some of my own jokes. I'm like, oh, really? Bottom line, I feel like this movie exceeded expectations. I was coming in to rip it, and found myself truly drawn in by the characters, the acting, and the dialogue. I feel like this movie is going to affect me a lot differently than it may affect other people, because again, I feel like there's some kind of I literally feel like it's me talking to me. So therefore, the parts of it I like and that I'm proud of in my own work, I recognize, and I really like that. And the stuff that I don't like about my own work, and that I'm somewhat ashamed, not so much ashamed, but embarrassed by at this stage of the game, I dislike even more than I maybe normally would. So, trying to be objective is a difficult one on this one. So, when we talk about final grade, I feel like for this one, I have to go a B-. It is far better than I thought it had any right to be, and the dialogue and acting really, really sell it. And maybe I'm being too hard on it, and maybe it deserves a full B, but again, the parts that reminded me a little too much of my own adolescent or adolescent-minded work, sorry, it just rubs me the wrong way. But I would say give this film a chance, because I think it's actually got more to say, and it's more interesting than a lot of other stuff that's out there, if you can get past the rather bullshit setup. Or maybe that won't bother you as much. Maybe you'll really enjoy that. I don't know. So yeah, on the whole, I'm glad I watched this one. It was a surprise and a little bit of a sobering look in the mirror. So, all I can say is I'm glad I don't have to worry about it anymore. So, anyway, so that's this one. A pleasant surprise, if not a little bit of a rude awakening. for me at least. So anyway, that's this one. I say seek it out. All right, so let's wrap this up. Don't have much more to say, so I'm just going to say my catchphrase. So thank you all for joining me, and as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.